I started my business in '95 when I was 27, okay? And I came to Singapore from England to start the company. And I thought what I could share with you a little bit is a few pieces of experience about, starting a business, but also about what I've learned from setting up businesses now on 3 continents, because I went to Singapore and then to China and now back to the UK. But I also wanted to maybe give you some encouragement about what's available to you. Okay. So, and I'll answer some specific questions about PR for you as well. So the reason at the beginning I asked you about yourselves, even though this is supposed to be about, me giving you the sort of the seminar or session, is that the first rule really is to seek first to understand, and then to be understood, and then to find some common ground. So the first thing that one ideally does in any situation, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur, or even if you're not going to be an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurship is not for everybody, okay, is to first of all ask questions. Because if you don't ask questions, the chances of you being right when it comes to what you're saying are quite limited. They might be right in the sense that you might have the right answer. You might answer, the answer to the universe and all things about life is 42. If you watch Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you may know that, right? But it may be no one else in the room cares or is interested in it. So the first, if you like, thought that I'd like you to kind of take away with you, and this is extremely easy and it's free, is before you start anything, ask questions. Okay, seems obvious, right? Now, you're all, what, 18, 19 now, right? Is that right? Or 20?
19.
Yeah.
We are
How
19.
old are you now? Sorry? 19, right. So, yeah, so you've gone through an education system, especially in Singapore, where you've been taught not to ask questions a lot of the time. Would that be fair to say? Yeah. So one of the problems with the education system that we have is that it is fundamentally designed to create people who will take instructions. Now, the problem is that the other people or the other group of doers that are good at taking instructions are computers, right? So the thing that computers cannot do is ask questions. So what's going to differentiate people from computers in the future will be your ability to ask questions. This was not the issue when Jin and I started our businesses 30 years ago, because there were not computers. It'll seem strange, but there weren't mobile phones. Okay. I got to Singapore, and to communicate with my family in England, I sent them a blue airmail letter, which I would buy, and it was only this long, and you'd write, and by the end you realize you hadn't got everything in, so you'd have to do smaller and smaller letters, and then you'd post it. People get it a week later. Okay, so you've got the gift of technology, but you've got the curse of technology. Asking questions first is what will give you the competitive advantage against machines, and that frankly is your greatest threat, not one another. Okay, so job replacement through computers is the biggest trend, really, along with global warming and some other things like that, that are going to impact your generation. Okay, you've unfortunately been through an education system that's preparing you for taking instructions, but the economic dynamic has changed so that taking instructions is not going to be the safeguard of your future economic employment. that make sense? Does that make, you can ask Siri a question, you can ask what it's called Echo or whatever it is, right? So the reason I'm mentioning this is because Jen asked me to talk to you about entrepreneurship. Okay, now my first experience of entrepreneurship was at 18. I was working selling toys and furniture and carpets to make enough money to go to Australia for a project called Operation Rally. You know, and I was earning by the hour. I was earning about, I think it was $2.50 an hour at the time, to give you an idea. And at the time, that was okay money, right? Living at home and so on. Now, the problem was I needed £2,000. I didn't have enough hours in my year to earn the money I needed to earn and have the time to go on my expedition. I couldn't do it. So I had to find a solution. And the solution was to jump out of an aeroplane. So I jumped out of an aeroplane and I got sponsorship for it. And if you checked out my LinkedIn or checked out my website or looked for anything about me on the internet, you'll see I started a PR firm because what I learned by that problem that I had, which is I couldn't earn enough, quickly enough for my goals, I had to find a solution, and that was to jump out of a plane. And I did that because I was afraid of jumping out of a plane. I was afraid of heights. So I was the kid on the Empire State Building who wouldn't go close to look over the edge, right? My sisters were like, come on, come on. I was like, no, I was scared. So I was afraid, but also I knew that it was something that was scary enough for lots of other people that they would sponsor me to do it. So by jumping out of an aeroplane, I got £1,000 in an afternoon, basically. I had to go around to all the people in this department store, like Tangs on or Wisma Atria, right? I went around, I used to work in one of those, right? And I went around to everybody. I also learned that people who make the least money were the most generous. But by getting all those people to sponsor me, I made in an afternoon what I normally would make in 2 months. And I went, aha, there's something in this. So I went to Operation Rally. Then when I went to America to study at university, I wanted to go on an expedition to Central America, and I had the same problem. When I worked as a waiter, I made good money, but it was never enough. So I designed some T-shirts, and I called it the Talamanca Trail. And I designed some T-shirts. I got a glass, stuck it on a white T-shirt, drew around it. Even my daughters now would laugh at how bad the T-shirts were. But I designed a T-shirt called Talamanca Trail, and I put on the back a map of Central America, and I went from North Carolina down to Costa Rica overland over a period of 10 weeks. And I didn't speak Spanish, so I took a Spanish course, and I went overland. But I sold these T-shirts, but also then I approached some companies in North Carolina to sponsor me. Right? And a translation company sponsored me for $1,000 on the grounds that I would then do a diary and write an article for them. Okay. So now this is not just once, but twice I've got myself out of a hole by doing something that other people thought was interesting. Now, I had lots of my friends went from North Carolina to California, and they rented a car and they went to California. In fact, they dropped me off in New Mexico and they said, come on, we're going to California, we're going to LA, San Francisco. And, you know, that would have been the easy and the fun thing to do, right? It would have been easy and fun. They didn't get any sponsorship because, you know what? It was easy and fun. No one's going to sponsor you to go and have fun, right? It's not worth it. But by going overland, I took cattle trucks, buses, all manner of things to Central America. And I learned Spanish on the way. And I went to the anniversary of the FSLN, the Sandinista Revolution, right? So I went to Managua, and I was there along with 10,000 people. So I had an adventure. So the second point I would say to you is that life is for living. Okay. And in Singapore, where I lived, and I'm still a Singapore PR, by the way, I was just on the phone with my Singapore team now. I personally believe that you only accomplish in proportion to what you attempt. Now, the challenge with Singapore is that the education system tells you what to think. You go into the Army for National Service and tell you what to do. And then you come out and you go, well, now, do I get a job where I'm told what to do? But that's great, but it can be a little bit frustrating, right? Because you're going to be told how much you're going to earn. You're going to be told when to turn up. You're going to be told when you can have a holiday. Now, some people like that. For some people, the absence of decision-making is a relief. And if that is who you are, there is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with that. 90% of the world's population turns up and gets told what to do. Work is an extension of the parent-child relationship. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. For most people, that is just how they want to live. And I respect that. There are some awkward people like Jin and me who are not so keen to be told what to do. Okay. Now, so what I did by jumping out of a plane, by traveling to Central America, was I realized that by deciding what I wanted to do for myself, I could actually make it happen. Okay. That it's possible to make pretty much anything happen, but not if you follow what everyone else is doing. Okay. So by going to Central America, I raised the money and I wrote the article, and I came back to the university, finished my degree, and then I tried working for people for a couple of years. Darren, are you going to be okay, buddy? I see you stifling a yawn. Do you need to get up and walk around a bit? You'll be okay? Right. So, and that's okay if you're tired, right? So then I worked for people for 3 years. Okay. And in my first job out of university was an ad agency, which was great fun. I worked for a brilliant man called Bill Daring, who's actually since passed away. He wasn't very old. He had a nasty disease. So after 6 months, that company went out of business, and I was one of the last people in the business, and I was selling the furniture. So there I was at 23. I got a big paying job, which disappeared. Okay, the company went out of business. So I got another job working for some people in the cakes business, and that was going great. But basically, it was turn up, get paid. Didn't matter how much I did or not. I got paid the same amount of money. So I thought, well, that's kind of not kind of how I like to do things. And then I got another job offer to become a worldwide marketing manager for a music business. Okay, music technology. So I took that, and that's what brought me to Asia. So I went to Singapore, went to Taiwan or Taipei, to Tokyo, I went to LA, went to New York. This is back in 92, 93, right? This fantastic time, I imagine before you were all born. Well, it would be before you were born. So there's a sign of age, right? So I could walk down Telok Ayer Street and there were no cars for me to get out of the way of, right? If you look at it if you think about it that way, right? There was no Sentosa. I could cycle around Sentosa, and there was me and the monkeys, right? There was the Beaufort, but it wasn't a hotel, right? So it was a fabulous time to be there. So I decided I would come to Singapore to start the company. I took 2 suitcases and sold my house in England and said goodbye to the girlfriend and got on a plane. And I landed, and after a few weeks, discovered that actually I wasn't legal, right? I got there on a tourist visa, and after 30 days, I would have to leave. So I found an accountant called Casey Lau, who's still a good old friend, and he helped me to set up a company and to employ myself. Okay. Now, with that little trick, I was able to start what is now a 27-year-old business or 25-year-old business. Now, the reason that that's important is because I knew I wanted to leave England. I knew I wanted to get to Singapore. I knew I wanted to start my own business, but I didn't know all the answers, right? And one of the things that Jin will tell you as well about being an entrepreneur is that you can never know all the answers. So this is the next big point about entrepreneurship, is that you have to be willing to live with some uncertainty. I mentioned that if you work for somebody, it's a parent-child relationship. Someone is telling you what to do, and in return for you doing that, you'll be paid an income, right? And you may or may not be given a desk or a laptop, right? And that's great, and that's reassuring, and that's great for most people. For some people, like Jin and me, who are awkward old buggers, that's not quite what we want to be, okay? We'd like to decide what we want to do when we want to do it. And we'd like to choose how much money we get paid for it. The downside of that is the uncertainty, which is why entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Okay. Now, I was lucky in that then I started the business, but what I'd also done before I went to Singapore is I did what I asked you at the very beginning, which is I first of all sought to understand what people need. I wrote to everybody that I knew from my music technology business, and I wrote to them all and said, I'm going to Singapore and I'm going to run a PR firm. What do you need? And I had an address because I'd come out on a business trip, and I found 181A Pte Ltd Street. There was a guy who had it's called Asia Broadcasting Union magazine, Asia Pacific Broadcasting magazine. And I rented, actually about the same size as I'm in now I think about it. I rented about 1 meter by 1.5 meters. I got 2 computers in there, where you could only get 1 chair in the office. And that was the beginning of my office. It cost me $250 a month. And when I wrote to everyone saying, I'm going to Singapore, this is my address, 181A Pte Ltd Street. I can still remember the postcode, 086 or something it was. Anyway, Bakute store downstairs, probably not allowed anymore, but it's the smell of cooking turtles at lunchtime. But when I arrived then in Singapore, I had a whole stack of letters waiting for me. Okay. Remember, there's no internet, right? There's only letters. I had a big stack of letters. And some people were saying, wishing me well. Some people were saying they thought I was nuts. But a couple of people said, you know what, when you get to Singapore, please give us a phone call. Okay. In those days, it was a phone call. So I rang these people and they said, one guy said, look, can you come to Hong Kong next weekend? Because he had been someone I knew from my days of going to Hong Kong. He said, when you're in Hong Kong, come and give me a call. I'm starting a new business. I think you could help me. Okay. So within 3 months, I had clients, but it's only because I'd started the client development before I got there. I did a podcast the other day, and someone asked me about, it's an entrepreneur's podcast. And someone said, oh, can you give me any advice? And I said, well, you know, we all have different advice. But the thing I believe absolutely is you have to start with the customer first. And you start with the customer first if you ask the question, what do you need? So when I first came on the screen, I asked you all, what are you looking to get out of this call, right? Because if I don't know what you need, I cannot possibly give you, unless I'm extremely lucky, I can't possibly give you what you need if I don't ask. Now, if I don't ask you what you need and I don't give you what you need, guess what happens? Well, guess what doesn't happen? You don't get paid. Pretty simple, right? Now, this is a situation where I'm not getting paid. I'm doing this for Jin, right? So as I'd do anything for Jin. But imagine If this is a seminar and I've been paid to give a seminar and I just turn up and I just talk, or even if I not getting paid, I just talk, you'd be like, oh, you'd just be getting your phones out and you'd go, oh, I should be, you know, Jin set this up, it's a bit rubbish, really wasted my time, right? So then that's when you see everyone going to their phones or going to their computers, right? Because they're not really paying attention, right? So the first lesson, and there will probably be only one thing that you remember from this 40 minutes with me, right? And that's not because you're rude, it's not because you're not smart, but we remember 1 to 3 things from any situation. It's just proven, because there are so many things going on in our minds that you'll only be focused some of the time. I'm not interested all of the time, but also you'll have distractions, and over time, it'll all fade away. So the one thing I encourage you to do, no matter whether you're going to work for somebody else or you're working for yourself, is to ask, what do they need first? So if you remember that, ask first what people need, and then share what you can do. And then you can start the negotiation of what are you going to do for how much? Okay. This, by the way, is not dissimilar if you go for a job. If you turn up for a job and just say, you know, right, what's the job? Right, or you say, let me tell you about me. First of all, you want to know as much about the job and the organization and the manager and the opportunities as possible before you give a reply, right? Because you've got a huge amount of stuff you can tell them, but they'll only remember one thing about you, right? So you want to make sure it's the right thing. Okay, so making sense? So a little bit of that, so about entrepreneurship, right? So, and then in 2006, I went to China to start another business. So I started EastWest PR, another suitcase, then started a few other businesses, including importing sports cars, drinks, started the British Business Awards, British Motorsport Festival. So I've had a lot of fun on the way, but I'm also living with risk. Okay, so I mentioned there'll be, you know, one thing maybe you remember, which will be start with asking other people what they want. The second lesson, if it's worth calling it that you might want to think about is, if you start your own business, you will have risk. If Jin had gone to work for a big company, he'd be head of corporate IT now in a bank or in, you know, one of the state-owned enterprises. He's extremely capable. You probably don't know just how bright he is. He's a gifted programmer, right? But he decided to trade his liberty and his independence for the trappings of a big company, right? Now, he lives with the insecurity. And when I moved from Singapore, I lived with insecurity. When I moved to China, I lived with insecurity. When I moved back to England, I lived with insecurity. Now, personally, I don't mind that, because the great thing about that insecurity is it makes you get up off your ass and it gets you to prove how good you are. It's actually proven that physiologically, if a situation becomes too comfortable, we stop using as much of our brains. If you've read, I don't know whether you've ever done it, the reading into the psychology, right? This is why Singapore, as much as I love Singapore, is a dangerous place, because so many decisions are made for you. So much is so easy and so safe, whether it's getting on the train, whether it's your CPF, whatever it is. Singapore makes it an extremely safe place to live. And that's a wonderful thing, but it also means it stops you taking some risks. And it's the risks that you take, and it's the fear of failure, and it's the pain and the suffering that makes you grow. Okay, so it's a bit like the fear of failing an exam. We all study a bit harder. The fear of disappointing your mum and dad or a friend makes you work a little bit harder. When life gets too comfortable, that's when we tend not to push ourselves. Okay, so I personally like, which is why I've done it, every 10 years I change my world. I did 10 years in Manchester and I got comfortable at the house. I had the big job. People said, why are you leaving? I said, because I'm middle-aged before I'm 30. I'm already getting fat. So I got to Singapore at 27, started a business, and then left when I was 40. I said, well, look, I'm in Singapore. It's very comfortable. I've got all the friends. I'm a member of the Tangling Club. But you know what? I'm not challenged. I'm not growing. And I think there's more to life than just reaching a certain place and going, that's it. That's all I want to accomplish. So I went to China and studied Chinese. And in the morning, I did Chinese lessons. And in the afternoon, I ran my business. And I don't think I did either one particularly well, by the way. I didn't become fluent in Mandarin, and I didn't become particularly rich. But I did manage to start a business then in China and start several businesses and to find a lovely wife and have lovely kids, right? And I also became a lot smarter and a lot wiser and a lot harder working, and learned about a whole new culture and how people travel across. And I went on trains when I didn't speak the language, and I learned the language, learned how to ask, how to get to places, right? And it's only by this constant challenging of ourselves that we become better. Makes sense, right? It's a bit like if you just go to the gym and you look at the gym equipment and you go, well, I've got no goals, then you'll never pick up the weights, right? I ran the marathon in Singapore at 40, and I got a 3 hour, 57 minute. I don't know whether you guys run or not, right? So I ran with the Gurkhas, and I came 165th in the marathon in Singapore. And when I turned up, I was like, where is everybody? When I was at the front, I was like, where is everybody? And a friend of mine was running it, and he said, Jim, what are you doing at the front? Where did you start? I said, well, I start with everybody else. And I said, but where is everybody? He said, they're behind you. And I said, I had no idea. So this is the next thing I learned. The first marathon I did in Singapore, I started at the back. Right, I started at the back because I thought, oh, I'm quite slow. I'll run at the back. You know, I spent the first 45 minutes to an hour getting past the slow people. Right. The next marathon, I decided I would start at the front, just behind the elite runners. I'm not an elite runner. I'm just a 40-year-old guy training, and I trained in Beijing, actually, and the weather's so bad I had to train indoors for a marathon, right? You're talking 2-3 hours a session on the treadmill. But on this occasion, what I did was I started just behind the elite runners. With my cousin was a member of the Gurkhas. So I traveled with them at 6 in the morning, and I ran with the Gurkha squadron, with the Gurkha battalion, at least until halfway. And I have to tell you, they fell back, I guess because they didn't have the backpacks on or whatever. I mean, they're a tough group of guys, that lot. But I'd been so focused on sub 4 hours. But the point of this story is that choose who you travel with. If you start with the slow people, you have to do a hell of a lot of work to get to the front of the race. If you start at the front, you're running with better runners. Psychologically, you're tracking at a faster pace. Your body actually can do 10 to 15% much more than you ever think you can do. But if you start the race at the front, guess what? You keep up with the front runners. If you start at the back, you kind of be like playing tennis or any sport. You get to be about as good as the people you hang out with. So choose the people that you want to hang out with. And they may not be your best friends, but they should be the people that inspire you. Okay. Now that might mean that some people say, oh, Cheryl doesn't hang out with us anymore. She thinks she's too good. You know what? You might just be that person that's too good to hang out with everyone else. And don't be afraid of that, because actually there's another group of people who are really good, and you start to hang out with them instead. Pretty much all of my friends around the world are entrepreneurs now. And it's because the way I think, the way entrepreneurs think, is different. We ask questions first because we need to know what people are going to pay us for. We live with uncertainty, but we like that because that makes us work harder, smarter, and not relax, not get sloppy. And we surround ourselves with people who inspire us, not people who just give us reassurance that life is going to be just okay. Okay, so think about who you're hanging out with. Jen and I have been friends for decades, and whenever we're together, it never feels like we missed each other, right? But immediately we're talking about, well, how are you solving this problem? I want to know about how Faris is doing, I want to know how Nora is doing. But also we always talk about, well, what are you doing? Yeah, you could do that, encouraging each other. So the people that work for people are normally complaining about their bosses, pretty much always, because they're always finding an excuse for why they're not where they should be. Entrepreneurs never complain about their bosses and never complain about their situations. You know what? Because they made it themselves. You don't find entrepreneurs complaining about their situation because it's their choice. Can't complain. Okay. So now you asked a couple of questions on a more practical level about business overseas and about PR. So business overseas, I've done it now for 25, 30 years, and I've gone to different places to start businesses. And I've done that because I wanted the challenge. Now, I don't recommend this from a wealth building perspective. I have friends who've stayed in the same place and they've made more money because they build up a network. So it takes about 3 years to build a business, no matter where you are. Okay. About 3 years. The first year, you're sort of getting things right. The second year, you're getting it so you can deliver and make money. And the third, people get to know that you can do it. And the people that you've been talking to are ready for you to sell them stuff. So wherever you go is going to take a few years to get it started. But the basics of business are the same all over the world. You have to start with the question of what do people need? Now, in China, for example, when I went, what they needed was different to what they needed in Singapore. Okay, so when I said, for example, about British sports cars, the British sports cars in Singapore, not really that interesting, to be honest, because it's too hot, COE is too high, and people would rather have a Mercedes that someone drives for them with aircon, right? But in China, where being seen to be wealthy and having a large garage and a large space outside your house, having a British luxury sports car differentiates you from everybody else. Okay, so what's different about international business is that different people in different places are looking for different things. But the mechanisms of getting money from people is the same. You add value, you find out what the price is, you find out how you can get the cash from them. Maybe it's a mobile app, maybe it's cash, maybe it's gold bars, potatoes, whatever it is. And then you take your margin, you pay off your vendors, and then you keep the profit. Okay. Now, Jen, I'm mindful as well that time-wise, I've only got until 10:15, right? Is that right? Okay. So you asked about public relations there, a couple of you, I think. The real essence of public relations is about helping to align what your organization is saying about itself with the communities that you are talking to. Okay, people often confuse public relations as being press relations or publicity, and it is in part press relations and publicity. But if you see from my EastWest PR, or you see the Speak PR, I do a podcast every day on this. I'm personally a fan of taking a broader narrative around the communication of the business with 3 different groups: your internal, which is your staff, and then your partners who help you to make things happen, and then your customers. And actually they all need slightly different messages, but they all need a message in order to feel that they want to continue to work with you. So public relations now, coming all the way back, public relations is becoming increasingly digital, if not wholly digital. The next iteration of public relations is it's becoming AI powered. Okay, so there are tools like lately It's called trylately.com, that is now generating content using AI. Okay. And then if you look on my podcast, you'll see there are some tools now. One's called Rosebud, that's creating virtual people for modeling. Okay. Another one called Synthesia, that helps David Beckham speak 9 languages. Actually takes his facial expressions and rebuilds them so that he can speak in multiple languages. Okay. So public relations is being, whilst we speak, fundamentally altered by technology. Okay, which is why, coming all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, if you don't ask what people need from you, but you just wait to be given instructions, there won't be a job for you, because the technology will take it. You've got brains that no computer can match, but you've got to use in a way that doesn't just try and replicate a computer's instruction set. Okay, so with that, you're lucky and mindful of your time. So with that, in Jin, you're very fortunate to have a wonderful mentor. He's both a successful entrepreneur, but also an extremely good man. And that's also a very, very important thing, that it's not just about wealth, it's about, you know, your humanity and what you do with your time and your life. And Jin is a great example of that. So Jin, I hope that I've given you maybe a few things to think about. One is that you ask questions. The second is that you accept or live with uncertainty. And the third is that you find a cohort, you hang out with people who inspire you.